The city that burned to the ground in 1906 rebuilt itself faster than anyone thought possible and accidentally invented modern urban development. Everyone knows the 1906 San Francisco earthquake destroyed the city. Rubble, fires, tens of thousands dead. The accepted story goes like this. The disaster was so complete, so total, that it forced San Francisco to start from scratch. And starting from scratch, the city rebuilt smarter, faster, and better than before. Sounds logical, right? A reset button, but that's not actually what happened. Before we talk about what really happened, let's understand what the city looked like before the quake hit. San Francisco in 1906 wasn't some backward frontier town. It was the second largest city on the West Coast, a financial hub, a port city worth millions. When the earthquake struck at 5:12 in the morning on April 18th, it wasn't the shaking itself that destroyed San Francisco. It was what came after. The fires, the earthquake ruptured gas lines all across the city. Fires broke out in dozens of places simultaneously. And here's the thing about San Francisco's water system in 1906. It wasn't designed to fight a citywide inferno. The pipes broke. The pumps failed. For 3 days, fires burned unchecked, consuming block after block of wooden buildings, brick structures, everything. The actual earthquake damage was maybe a third of the total destruction. The fires did the rest. By the time the fires burned out, roughly 80% of the city was gone. Think about that, 80%. Over 28,000 buildings destroyed. Somewhere around 3,000 people dead, though the actual number's probably higher. The economic loss was staggering, roughly $400 million in 1906 dollars. To put that in perspective, that's like $12 billion today, an entire city's worth of wealth. Vanished in 3 days. So here's where the conventional story kicks in. The city was destroyed, therefore it rebuilt better, cleaner streets, wider avenues, modern water systems, fireproof construction. The disaster forced progress. It sounds almost inevitable when you say it that way. But let's look at what actually happened in those first weeks after the quake, because the real story is messier and way more interesting. The city didn't have a master plan. There was no grand vision handed down from City Hall. What happened instead was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Property owners wanted to rebuild immediately. They had insurance to collect, mortgages to pay, businesses to restart. The faster they rebuilt, the faster they could get back to making money. And the city government, overwhelmed and undersourced, basically let them. Here's the thing that changes everything. Most of San Francisco wasn't actually rebuilt from scratch. Property lines stayed the same. Street grids stayed the same. The lot sizes, the block patterns, the fundamental shape of the city, all of it remained. Developers didn't want to wait for new surveys or property disputes. They rebuilt on the same footprints as fast as possible. So why did the city actually improve? Because of one thing, building codes. After the disaster, San Francisco implemented stricter regulations. Wooden buildings in dense areas were restricted. Steel frame construction became mandatory downtown. Fireproof materials were required. These weren't sweeping urban redesigns, they were technical specifications, but they made an enormous difference. The real innovation wasn't the city layout, it was the infrastructure underneath. The water system got rebuilt with redundancies. Multiple pumping stations, interconnected pipes, cisterns on rooftops. The gas lines got buried deeper with better shut-off valves. Electrical lines went underground in some areas. These weren't visible changes. You wouldn't see them walking down the street, but they prevented future catastrophes. And here's what nobody talks about. The speed of the rebuild was actually a problem, not a solution. By 1915, just 9 years after the earthquake, San Francisco had rebuilt to pre-disaster levels. The city was booming again, but it had done it by cutting corners, by prioritizing speed over perfection. The newer buildings weren't dramatically better designed, they were just built to minimum code. So what actually reshaped American urbanism? Not the earthquake itself, not some visionary master plan, it was the insurance system. After 1906, insurance companies demanded better building standards. They wouldn't insure wooden structures in dense urban areas. They wouldn't insure cities without adequate water systems. Insurance companies became the enforcers of urban improvement because they had money at stake. This created a ripple effect. Other cities looked at San Francisco's recovery and realized they needed to improve their own infrastructure, not because of some moral imperative, because insurance was expensive and better-built cities had lower premiums. Cities could save money by investing in water systems, fire departments, building codes. Suddenly, infrastructure improvement made financial sense. San Francisco's rebuild also highlighted something crucial about density. The earthquake hit a densely packed city. Wooden buildings crammed together. When one burned, it took the next one with it. This pushed cities toward thinking about zoning, keeping residential areas separate from industrial areas, limiting building heights, creating buffer zones. Not because planners suddenly got smart, because concentrated risk was expensive. The real story of San Francisco's transformation isn't about disaster forcing innovation. It's about financial incentives reshaping cities. Insurance companies, property owners, banks, they all wanted to minimize risk. And minimizing risk meant building better infrastructure, enforcing codes, and spreading density strategically. The earthquake was a catalyst, but money was the engine. By the 1920s, San Francisco had become a model for urban development. Journalists and city planners visited to study the rebuilt city. They saw modern infrastructure, stricter building codes, and a thriving economy. What they didn't see was that none of it was planned. It emerged from thousands of individual decisions, all motivated by the desire to protect money and reduce risk. This matters because it shows how cities actually change, not through grand visions or enlightened planning, through market forces, financial incentives, and insurance mathematics. When we think about urban problems today, housing, infrastructure, density, we're often looking for the wrong solutions. We're waiting for some visionary plan, some earthquake moment that forces everything to change. But real change comes from making the right financial incentive. San Francisco didn't rebuild better because disaster struck. It rebuilt better because the financial system demanded it. Property owners needed insurance. Cities needed investment. Banks needed confidence. When you align financial incentives with better outcomes, cities improve. When you don't, they stagnate. That's the real lesson from 1906. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe to explore more hidden economics behind the cities we live in, new investigations every week. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.